Welcome to Break of Throw, and today we are going Dutch. Laura Turner and I are going to look at the throws of not just any Dutch duo, but the international pairs winners in Jimmy van Schie and Danny van Trijp. Laura, we'll start with Jimmy. Look, he's a very interesting character, the way that he throws the darts. He's huge, so that's going to come into play as well. Let's start by taking a look at his throw. Yeah, he's been very successful here at the Super Series in particular. There's quite a lot going on, isn't there? As you see there, it looks like a simple throw, but he has to think about a lot.
Yeah, and I think his height obviously comes into play. You mentioned it. So he's already leaning forward. He's quite stooped over, but there's a process to it. It's a real methodical approach in terms of, as you can see there, he sets it up. He has the pullback, has the release. But like I say, I just think it's unorthodox, but I think he's having to adapt to the fact that he is probably one of the tallest players that are on the circuit.
Yeah, we think 6'7" and maybe some interest as well. I wonder what height he is when he's actually throwing, because there's an awful lean to kind of counter that there, isn't there, as well?
There is, and you have to. We do see it with players when they lean forward, but then there can be issues with balance. And I think what you sometimes see with Jimmy is he will use his shoulder and there'll be more movement. He's one of those players that is almost feeling the dart. He's reacting to it because he'll throw a couple where there's movement, and then when he feels comfortable, that everything's set in place. So I think, like I say, that element of balance is probably something he has to control as well.
He's kind of a bit of a craftsman as well, isn't he, when you look at that kind of scenario for Jimmy. He seems to really understand the angle of entry of his darts, the way his darts behave. You can see him shuffling slightly across to navigate that one and doing it very well indeed. How important is it to understand the way that your darts fly, the way your darts land? Yeah,
very important indeed, obviously. And for a lot of players, myself included, we tend to throw up to the board. But again, because Jimmy is that much taller, his viewpoint will be totally different to what most of us expect. So we would think, right, there's a clear path through. But for Jimmy, he has to move. He has to shuffle along the oche. But what he can do is work out those angles, adjust really well. Like you say, it is a craft and it is something that he would have practiced a long time. But you can see that even the progression here at the Super Series, he is getting better and better.
It's interesting you say that. Is his throw then, what we see, is it a bit misleading? I'm also looking at elbow position, and it looks really low, but for him, it's probably the same as everybody else, really. But is it a little bit misleading, just watching as a layman?
Yeah, perhaps it is, because as you say, I would probably stand next to him and come up to the height of where his elbow is. So yeah, it's you've got to think of it from, like I say, looking down onto the board. He's one of those players, for me, as I said, he's improving all the time, but what he is understanding is more and more about his game, about his throw. Sometimes for me, it looks like a really awkward angle of entry into the board, but actually, for him, he knows the way around it.
Yeah, Laura, just looking at the grip here as well, seems to hold his darts quite far back and only using the index finger and the thumb, and maybe a finger just to sort of balance the dart out by putting it underneath the point. It's a very simple grip. I think that if I tried to throw a dart like that, it wouldn't reach the board.
I feel very similar about it as well. I feel like there's not a lot of contact between his hand. You'll see other players that they'll use pretty much every one of their fingers. But I mean, darts, I've always said it, darts is unique, and it's something that you hone your own skills before people start to look at it and critique. But it's almost like a delicate hold, isn't it? It's if I was going to do it, I think it would be on the floor.
Does it feel to you like a manufactured throw rather than what you might call a natural one?
Yeah, it's quite robotic. And again, I think that is because he's having to deal with different factors perhaps that we don't always have to deal with. I know recently, he has to contemplate the fact that a venue might not be quite as tall as what he would need it to be. And yeah, we laugh, but it's one of those things that perhaps that is why the stoop is there. So then he's developed this almost mechanical style where there's clear points to it. There's the step up, there's the set, there's the pullback, there's the release, and it doesn't really change throw to throw. And I think for a dart player, if you can do whatever the throw is, if you can replicate it every time, which Jimmy seems to be able to do, and get the results you want, it's conducive to get some of your best darts.
Jimmy as well, I mean, we spoke earlier about the way he needs to move if darts are blocking. Often that's when they're on the left-hand side of the board as you look at it. And that is because of where he stands, isn't it? If he's throwing across to that side, his dart's going to lean over quite dramatically. I always find it fascinating that every player doesn't stand in the middle. What do you think has kind of made Jimmy settle on standing so far over to the right?
I mean, it's not quite Bunting-esque, but it's not far off it, is it? But Again, it's where you start to feel comfortable. It's where you're practicing. He must like that angle of entry. He's obviously a dominant right-handed player. You will find quite a lot of right-handed players will stand slightly to the right. When I first started playing, I played in a very similar position. But what I did find is some of the venues that I played in didn't allow for me to stand in the same place. So then I had to work hard to bring the game back in the middle. As for Jimmy, where he's playing now, and playing in the PDC circuit, playing here at the MODUS Super Series, he's been allowed that space to stand exactly where he wants. As you say, it does leave a little room to manoeuvre if he needs to go to the right. Obviously, he has to kind of channel his way out. But again, it's something that he's worked with. That's where he feels comfortable. I think you'll find now more and more players, they are standing extremes left, extreme right. You'll get some that like it dead in the centre. I can't tell you why, but I know that we all have preferences.
You need bigger practice rooms then, don't you?
Yeah.
Because everyone's done it where they've tried to step across and there's just a wall there and you're not able to move. Yeah, very, very successful, often very accurate. He's been really good here, runner-up in a Champions Week as well, Jimmy Van Schie, fan favourite. Even though he has that sort of constructed, methodical, manufactured style of throw that we've spoken about, it is pretty easy on the eye, isn't it? And it can get people in here off the seats. Yeah,
it works really well. But like you say, it's not a difficult watch. We have some throws that I think are more awkward to watch than others. Jimmy definitely doesn't have that. And you'll see here, he's got those first two trebles in. The last one, there's just that slight less movement. And I think what he brings here is he's got that confidence and he understands his throw. He's kind of just free-flowing sometimes when he plays here at the Super Series.
He really does throw it as well, doesn't he? It's not one of those players who just kind of lets go of the dart and lets the technique do the work. Maybe it's because of what we spoke about with this kind of loose grip, not much contact with the dart in his hand. Maybe he has to give it some force for it to be so accurate.
Yeah, we say aggressive style, and we don't mean that by the player, but actually just by the force of the action. And you could say that with Jimmy, but also when you look at it when it's free flowing, for me, it's quite speedy as well. So he's kind of whipping that dart through right at the very end, which is then giving him that force and that accuracy. The release, the point of release, every single time, straight arm, straight in the treble 20 in this case.
Yeah, very interesting throw technique from Jimmy Van Schie. Danny Van Trijp, his partner in winning that international pairs tournament here at the Super Series. Very different, but when they came together, it was successful. We'll take a look at his throw. Interesting partners, Jimmy and Danny, in that International Pairs Week. Successful partners as well, but complete contrast in throw, pretty much every aspect of it. First of all, you can see his hockey position there is dead central.
Yeah, and much more in keeping with what you would prefer, I guess, then. But I get it. It does make sense, but he's kind of aligned his whole body. That weight distribution as well, it's all kind of on that front foot. He's not having to lean forward like Jimmy Van Schie does as well. So in terms of balance, which is going to be an ironic thing to say, but actually you'd think the balance for Danny Van Trijp, when he stood up at the hockey at least, that's all quite a lot more. It's more controllable than, say, a Jimmy Van Schie.
Yeah, you can draw a straight line, can't you, from the leading foot right up to the elbow to the wrist where the dart's going to be thrown from. I guess when we see Danny's throw, it's much faster. You would say it's more natural?
Yes, it's one fluid motion. It kind of goes from down by the side, the arm comes up into the release position, and straight, the release is straight away. Whereas with Jimmy, it's just that slightly more mechanical. But yeah, Danny, very much one motion. And again, one of those players that understands, needs to find the right angle, needs to move across the hockey. Players will do that anyway, but doesn't move very far, and he has more places to move because he is so central.
What is noticeable there is, despite everything being pretty straight, there's a little twist in the wrist. Is that something that gets corrected as he pushes the dart forward? Because you kind of think if he threw it at the angle we see him pull it back, then, well, watch out, referee, because it could go flying straight into him.
Yeah, it's stylized, isn't it? He's kind of, his hand's almost coming from that grip position. Because he's so quick, he's not giving himself a lot of time to pull it up, so he's got that curve that comes through. But when it comes to the release, again, dead straight.
And is that the danger, that clip there, really a good representation of what can go wrong for these fast players, that often the first dart can maybe sometimes be a little bit careless, like that one flew into the one and then he has to bail himself out. This visit actually ends up becoming a methodical visit that he takes greater care with, whereas with Jimmy, you're probably going to see less deviation with that first dart.
Yeah, and also I think sometimes with the faster players, they don't if they do throw one awry, then they don't give themselves enough time to adjust. What Danny did there was kind of just take that slight pause, then adjusts again. And with the bend in the wrist that you're talking about, if he hasn't quite got that right and up in position by the time he releases, then he might try and overcompensate by the time he gets to the point of releasing as well. So whilst it's a bit more natural, a bit more fluid, I actually think there are probably more things that can technically go wrong with this kind of throw.
And just in comparison, do you think that his throw is maybe a bit more of a flick? And that's something that I know Luke Humphries spoke about in another episode, that he kind of flicks the dart towards the board, whereas Jimmy's, as we discussed, was really forced. Yeah,
and I think out of everything, I think that might be to do with the way he actually holds the dart, the positioning of the dart in the hand. Again, it's very on the back thumb, so to get that motion through, he is going to have to use some kind of force, and he's not as forceful as, say, a Jimmy Van Schie, so he makes up with that by that, like you said, that little kind of whip through and flick of the release in the arm.
Well, we said we'd discuss balance, or everything pretty good in terms of when he's at the hockey, but it's when he walks away that he seems to have a problem. This was a memorable moment, wasn't it, from that international pair's success?
I know we shouldn't laugh, but obviously, no Danny Van Trijps were hurt in the making of this video in the end. Maybe just a little bit of pride with the fall, but having a joke about it in the end. But yeah, you've got to be aware of your surroundings. Normally, when they play up here, in their defence, there's only 2 players up on the stage plus a referee, so it's a little bit more crowded. But it's how you kind of get yourself back together after having a slip like that.
When it comes to Danny, I want to talk about rhythm as well, because he is that, we mentioned speed, but speed's all well and good. It has to be about rhythm as well, doesn't it? And you can see this checkout before that sort of embarrassing moment. 1 dart in the treble 19, and then 2 darts at tops, complete other end of the board, probably going that way because he can follow with the 3rd dart after the 2nd has gone in there. How important is it for a player like him to get that rhythm right, and can that be the difference in performance?
Yeah, we quite often use the phrase first dart merchant, and I think when you're a speedster and you're throwing at pace, you don't want to be stopping. So if you can get that first dart right, like we see with the 57 there, the adjustment up to the tops, and as you say, you're going to follow in the 3rd. If you've got the pace, the rhythm right, that's brilliant, but you need the accuracy first, and that's all about that first initial setup, because once you've found the first one, the other 2 are just going to flow straight behind it. It's when it goes wrong, that's when they have to stop, and sometimes that disruption of the pace, disruption of the rhythm can actually make the throw disastrous.
And when it goes right, it looks so easy.
Yes.
You mentioned it when we were discussing hockey position for Jimmy earlier on, being aware of your surroundings, getting used to what space you've got around you and stuff, because if the stage is a little bit shorter than you're used to, that can affect a lot of things. Some players have a quite sort of meticulous pre-throw routine, for example.
Yeah, so when we obviously play at the Super Series, as everyone knows, we go off in a certain direction because of cameras, and to make it a regular process. That happens in most tournaments we play. If you went back to, say, a Jimmy, and you know that Jimmy is going to be at the hockey standing to the right, you need to know exactly where you're walking back to as well. So I think those practice darts, especially in a team event, that gives you the opportunity to go, right, when I'm throwing behind this person, they're going to be stood there, so I just need to kind of adjust. Otherwise, you end up with people walking into each other. So knowing your surroundings when you get up onto a stage is invaluable.
I suppose in summary, Laura, they say in boxing that styles make fights, and the 2 very different styles made a very successful team. What do you think it was, apart from the sort of camaraderie between them, which I know is important in a team game? Much has been said about Littler and Humphries at the World Cup. Yeah. But in terms of their actual styles, Danny slightly faster than Jimmy, different throwing techniques. What do you think it was that made them the premier pairing that week?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned the camaraderie, but actually in terms of their styles and actually just their ability, they had confidence in one another. If they weren't happy with how someone was scoring as well, they weren't too shy about it, telling each other, and I think that's great. But what they've been able to do, so here in the final, obviously playing the Welsh duo, someone like Richie Burnett, where he is a player that is a bit staccato, he can kind of stop and look at the hockey or look at the board. What the pairing did really well overall was actually they kept true to their own form, but they also they gave them the time. So for Danny Van Trijp, for example, let's Richie Burnett have his throw, then he goes up, then he completes the process of throwing.
Yeah, Danny in particular that week, I noticed we spoke about Ironically, his spatial awareness, because again, we've seen him fall over
Yes.
again. Didn't know where the hockey was on that occasion in celebration. But he very much, I think more than anybody else, picked a spot where he was waiting, didn't he, behind the player that was throwing before him.
Yeah, and that's it. It's about process. It's about rhythm. Because, as I say, when you are someone, especially like a Danny Van Trijp, who wants to step up to the hockey and throw all three, you don't want to go to the hockey and then be waiting for someone to clear out of that space. You want them out of your eye line. So that's what the exclusion zone is for, so that player can get out of the zone before you really walk into it. That is the general idea of it. So everyone's out of the way. And as you can see there, he's let Richie get his darts off, gone up to the board, first dart comes up, and then that's the whole process that he can follow through without having to stop or break rhythm.
Personal preference, of course, but as soon as we've discussed both players, I'm going to ask you to kind of rate the throw. Which one for you is the one that's more likely to lead to more consistent success?
For me, it's Jimmy. I just think the way that he has that, the approach for me and everything, it just seems like it's more likely to find the target every single time. And that's no discredit to Danny Van Trijp at all. I just think that the mechanics of Jimmy's throw just lend itself ever so slightly better to a more consistent throw.
There we go. We'll put them together and they are a winning team. That is a breaker throw of the Dutch Joe, Jimmy Van Schie and Danny Van Trijp. Plenty more breakdowns of throws from players here at the Super Series and beyond.